Hello, welcome to Sabbath School with Branch Davidians. I'm Ed, and Mary's away this week with family. We're excited you're joining us today. We present or expound on a principle or belief related to the SDA Sabbath School Quarterly each week. This quarter is entitled God's Mission, My Mission. This week's study is called Esther and Mordecai. It focuses on the experience of Jews living in the wilderness, in foreign lands, either willingly or by captivity, and in particular, of course, the experience of Esther and Mordecai. Thursday's study is entitled The Miracle of Purim. Basically, it's about the turn in circumstances that occurred for the Jews and for those who attacked them. Most of you are doubtless familiar with the story of Esther, but let's briefly recap the highlights so it's fresh in our minds, and then we'll focus on an important lesson we can learn from it. The king of Persia had ostracized the queen, and then, through a truly horrifying means, he picked a new queen from among the women in the empire. The woman he chose was Esther, who, unbeknownst to him, was a Jew. At some point after this, the king promoted a man named Haman to a high position in his government. The king's servants were supposed to bow to Haman, but Mordecai, Esther's cousin, refused. In response, Haman sought to destroy the Jews. To that end, he succeeded in getting a decree issued under the authority of the king to exterminate the Jewish people. Here's how Esther 3:13 summarizes that decree. Letters were sent by couriers into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to plunder their possessions. Again, that's Esther 3:13. And as you probably know, Esther found a way to turn the king against Haman and to petition the king to revoke the decree. But since no decree of the king could be revoked according to Persian law, they had to devise another way to protect the Jews. So the king permitted Esther and Mordecai to write a new decree in the name of the king. So let's read the particulars of this law. Esther 8:11 through 12 reads, In those letters the king granted the Jews who were in every city to gather themselves together and to defend their life, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and province that would assault them, their little ones and women, and to plunder their possessions, on one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar. Again, that's Esther 8:11 through 12. It's important to notice the fact that this decree gave them a right to do to their attackers what Haman's decree had given a right to the attackers to do to the Jews. In Esther 3:13, Haman's decree had said to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, young and old, little children and women, and to plunder their possessions. Then, in Esther 8:11, the decree Mordecai wrote gave the Jews a right to defend themselves against their attackers, particularly to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all the power of their attackers, little children and women, and to plunder their possessions. Clearly, Mordecai's decree is based on the wording of Haman's decree. It seems like the intention here is to make those who would attack the Jews think twice, since the moment they attacked, they would give the Jews the legal right to inflict on them all the things which Haman's decree had planned against the Jews. Interestingly, in the portion of Esther that describes what happened when the attack came, it says the Jews killed their attackers, but only mentions men, and it specifies that they did not take their possessions. Esther 9:6 and 10 reads, In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men, but they didn't lay their hand on the plunder. And verse 15 likewise reads, The Jews who were in Susa gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month Adar, and killed 300 men in Susa, but they didn't lay their hand on the plunder. So, even though the Jews had a legal right to take the possessions of their attackers, they chose not to exercise that right. This brings us directly to the principle that is the main lesson of our study today. Simply stated, the principle is this: our rights, as important as they are for society, are not a good guide for determining what we as individuals should do. To expound on this, let's first explain what a right is all about. To say a person has a right to do something really just means that others aren't allowed to stop that person from doing it, but it doesn't tell you whether the person should or should not do it. For example, the right to vote doesn't make it so that I must vote. It just makes it so that others are unable to prevent me from voting. Same thing with the right to change a place of residence. That right simply prevents others stopping me from moving, but it doesn't insist that I must change my place of residence. If I want to know whether or not I should move, my right to move doesn't help me with making that decision. The same is true for the right to marry, have children, own property, express opinions, and the list goes on. All of these rights are prohibitions on others, requiring them not to force or prevent me from acting on whatever decision I make. Likewise, the fact that others have these same rights is a prohibition on me, requiring me to not prevent them from acting on their decisions in these areas. But when it comes to me deciding what I'm going to do with myself, my rights aren't instructive. What should guide our choices isn't our rights, but instead our responsibilities. This is actually just what responsibilities are. They are things we should do. This is really important to understand because looking to our rights to guide us versus looking to our responsibilities to guide us can often result in very different actions. Take Jesus, for example. In John 16, he told his disciples, "I still have many things to tell you, but you can't bear them now." Now, obviously, Jesus is Lord, and he had every right to say anything he wanted to his disciples. But thankfully, he never chose to do something merely because he had a right to do it. Instead, he chose his actions based on a higher principle, his responsibilities. He had been commissioned by God to train his disciples and prepare them to do a great work. This required telling them things only as fast as they can handle them or benefit by them. You see, our main focus as followers of Jesus should be helping others. That was Jesus' focus. For example, Jesus had a right to stay in heaven and not come to earth. Jesus did nothing wrong that would require him to subject himself to the sin of this world for the sake of justice. But because of his responsibility to help others, he gave up the right to stay in heaven in order to come to us. Hebrews said he became like us in every way, so he would better understand how to help us overcome sin in our lives. See Hebrews 2:17 through 18. He loved us so much that he lowered himself to take on our fallen, sin-affected nature, Romans 8:3, so he could be among us to show us the way of truth and love, the way of responsibility. So this principle, again, that we should make decisions based on our responsibilities rather than our rights, is far-reaching and has a lot of implications. Mostly, we want to make you aware of this principle and encourage you to keep it in mind as you make decisions. And we need to remember to have Jesus as our model. At times, he even let his rights be violated, like when he was put on trial and crucified. Yet he didn't always say nothing in face of misrepresentation and abuse. Why did he respond to poor treatment differently at different times? Well, he clearly wasn't basing his decisions on his rights. If so, he would have always defended himself and would have never subjected himself to abuse. But as we've seen, he made his choices based on his responsibilities, which meant sometimes he needed to allow himself to be abused, and other times he needed to escape abuse. It all depended on what he needed to do in order to fulfill his responsibilities to his Father and the people he was trying to save. When we focus on our rights, it can lead to defensiveness, anger, and rash retaliation against abuse, whether those abuses are perceived or real. Focusing on our responsibilities, on the other hand, leads to being cool-headed, thoughtful, and yet decisive. And even when it leads us to avoid or put a stop to abuses, it prompts us to do so out of motives that aren't merely interested in self-preservation, but are instead interested in bringing about what is best for everyone including those who mistreat us. It's important to understand that focusing on our responsibilities rather than our rights doesn't result in more violations of rights. Instead, it results in a more principled and thus more powerful and effective means of dealing with wrongs. It leads us to know when to handle wrongs in one way or another, and enables us to go through it all with the right motives. If we ever don't know what to do, we should seek a knowledge of our responsibilities and look to Jesus. He is our example, our guide, and our source of strength. Thank you for staying with us till the end. We invite you to visit our website, www.bdsda.com, to learn more about who we are and, just as important, who we are not. Please join us each week as we will continue to offer new and interesting insights for your Sabbath School studies. And if you want to keep up with our new studies as they are published, we recommend subscribing. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on plenty of other podcast apps. Links for subscribing are in the description. God bless, and from Mary, many blessings.